welcome to Ake Festival. I've had the best time reading your books over and over and over again because I'm that kind of person.
Thank you.
Welcome. I think this is your first time at Ake for three of you.
Yes.
How has the experience been so far? Tell me.
It's been incredible. It's been incredible. It's my second international festival, and it's way up there with one of the best things I've experienced this year. So well done to all of you.
And for me, it's been really great to come back to the world of festivals, especially I'd never been to Lagos, so the combination of coming to Ake and Lagos at the same time has been like, doubly amazing, let me say. But yeah, I've been having a fantastic time. It's a really great festival. It's a great atmosphere, wonderful people, and great food. I love to travel for the food, and so far this has been like 100%. Yeah.
Okay, this is my very first event, I think. Yeah, it's actually the very first. And I am so happy to be here. And it's been amazing. I've met amazing people, amazing readers that I've only known on Instagram. So it's been awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so proud, so happy that I get to share the stage with three of my faves. Like Ms. Shunei was saying, sometimes it feels like YA in Nigeria, in Africa, is untapped. How was the publishing process for you? How smooth was it to get your book out there? You can start now.
Okay, so when you say publishing process...
Like from submission to acceptance, how easy was it for you, considering you have like a YA novel?
YA novel, okay. First of all, I really didn't think about this gap that existed. I just knew as a child I really didn't have many African books to read that were suitable to my age. I mostly had the Western novels. So I had to create a book I wanted to read. I would have loved to read as a child. And I just submitted it casually. Now, here's the thing. The kind of books I write are not the exact definition of African literature. I mean, I barely see mystery novels set in Nigeria, set in Africa. So it was more of just throw your work out there and let people just see it. And Masobe Books saw it, and they accepted it, and we went through the whole editing phase, went through all of it, and the book is here. And it was actually after my submission, I found out that a lot of people were really excited to have YA finally come out. And I'm like, oh, wow, it wasn't just me. So, yeah, it's I felt like I was a dream come true for everyone. So, yeah.
That's so good. How was it like for you, Blessing?
Well, for me, it's been quite a long journey. I've been writing. I started off writing for children, and my protagonists got progressively older until I ended up writing, my first adult fiction book, and I kind of, got older and older and older. Then I stopped, and I'd taken a break. In fact, I'd actually given up writing fiction, and I had decided I was going to start working in film. And so this YA, this book that I wrote, it found me rather than any, it was, I wrote something which a friend shared with another friend, and then that friend introduced me to Sarah at Accord Literary, and we had a chat, and I had nothing because I hadn't been writing fiction for a long time. So, I thought, okay, well, maybe let me find something to write. And this whole story just kind of formed itself within a very short space of time. And in 50 days, I was done. So I think maybe the break that I took from writing kind of honed my skills somehow. And that's how it came about. And then it just kind of took a life of its own.
Oh, wow, in 50 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this incredible thing.
It was a very insistent story, and the characters they were very much alive and very, persistent and like get it out there. So I just sat and I wrote, and it got done, which is unusual for me because I'm a procrastinator of note. Yeah.
Well, it worked for you, and I'm very glad. How about you, Ruby?
Okay, so I got into YA a bit by accident. I actually started off with my first two novels were adult novels. My very first novel was after a bad medical scare I had. I had developed a lump in my breast, and I thought it was breast cancer. And I think I was just about 26 then. And because I'm a dentist, I have a bit of medical training, so all my imagination just went wild, all the horror stories you hear. So that first book was more of like, what if it was not a benign tumor? What if it was malignant? So that was my first book. And a little after that, there was an ad for young adult book submissions at that time by the BET Award in Ghana. So I'd finished 2 adult books, and I thought, well, how difficult can writing for a young adult audience be? So I'm also another procrastinator, so I waited 3 weeks to the deadline before I started writing my story. And I remember in like maybe submissions, you had to submit 80 pages, and after like 2 hours, my story was done, and I had 5 pages. And also, am I going to get 75 other pages from? Yeah, so it was a bit of an accident. I entered that story, that competition. My book placed third, and then I've just been going strong with YA from then.
Oh, wow, that's an incredible story, right? Let's talk about this particular story, even when your voice shakes.
Yes.
So we see Amelie. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Amelie, yes.
Yeah, yes, got it. So we see Amelie, and she sort of has to be the mother, even at 16. She has to be the mother to 3 younger sisters, right? And what I want to ask you is, do you think, we all know, but what do you think about children, older children, essentially losing their childhoods because of so many factors? In Amelie's case, poverty. Older children losing their childhoods, and not being able to be children. To what extent do you think this is detrimental to their well-being? Because you see Amelie, she has so many hats on. She is a mother, and so many other things go wrong when she has to step up because she's not of age. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so in writing about Amelie, and I think it's, maybe it cuts across even into middle-class families where the first child has, maybe unconsciously, but then all these responsibilities, you're in charge of your younger siblings. When you go out, look after your brother and sister, when you're going to school, when they're crossing the road. So unconsciously, I think we put a lot of burden on the firstborn children. I've seen it a bit in my own family, and like my sister who is before me, she's in charge of everything. Even till now, we still, go to her when in our own personal issues. So I think it's something that cuts across. But in Amelie's case, with the added burden of poverty and with the added burden of her parents just not caring or not being there, it steps everything up a notch. And that's how come she takes all this responsibility. And even though she's a child herself, she doesn't get to experience childhood, or she doesn't get to behave. She doesn't have the luxury of behaving like any other ordinary child would, because she has to step up and take care of her younger siblings.
What do you think we should change, we could change about this?
So I think, I don't know how it is in other countries, but then in Ghana now, at least in the Christian sects, like when you're going to get married, you have premarital counseling, and they do all those things. I think a larger emphasis should be put on post-marital counseling, and then what you do after the marriage, and understand that a child is a child. The fact that you have children that you say, oh, she's an old soul in a young person's body, or she's just takes after her grandmother. I think those are all excuses that we as adults put on children. I think leave a child to be a child, leave a child to make their own mistakes. Because you grow up and then you realize that the world is really not what you thought it would be. And imagine having this burden placed on you at a younger age, you know. So we force children to grow up quickly, and then when they are adults and they are probably not very stable mentally, we wonder why. I think it's all this responsibility we put on children at an early age. So leave kids to be kids, leave them to make their own mistakes, leave them to explore the world and make their own choices and decisions.
Thank you so much. You heard what she said. Let children be children. I'm going to move to you, Blessing and Miracle. Your books are both mysteries, I'd say. I'd say for you, exactly, I'd say. To me, you're a mystery, Blessing. So your books are both mysteries. They deal with death in the family, right? They are very sensitive issues, but you've taken them. You've brought a nuanced tale. There's compassion. It's not just a murder. It's not just a mystery. What made you feel like you were the best person to tell this story?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, you wrote a murder, right? Not a murder. You wrote something about death in the family.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, and I like the way you wrote about it with compassion. What made you feel like you were in the best place to tell this story?
Oh, okay. It was a very interesting thing because when I started writing the story, initially when I was thinking of the story, there wasn't a death. Initially, the mother was just going to be absent, and I couldn't figure out what reason I wanted to give her for being absent. I actually had initially thought that she had run away with another man, and she just got tired of being a mother and the burden of a family, and she wanted to go and be herself because she'd been a mother so young and kind of just never really got to understand who she was as a person. But then somehow that became a death, and I had sort of buried it somewhere in the middle of the book, almost towards the end, to say this is what happened to the mother. The mother actually died, but in the editing process, the initial editing process with my agent, she said, let's start off with the family in crisis and put the death at the beginning. And so that of course is not the mystery, but I realized as I was writing it that I was myself kind of coming into a new season because I had been for years deeply affected by the death of my father in 2012, followed very closely by the death of my sister a year later. It was very unexpected, and up until that point in my life, I'd never experienced that level of grief. And when you're going through it, you don't actually realize that you're grieving. Your world just kind of like completely shifts, and everything stays the same, but everything has changed for you. And so exploring a family that is going through that from an externalized process rather than internalize, my process, it, I think, was kind of like the culmination of my own experience in sort of putting it in another family and then sharing it with the world from another viewpoint. Yeah.
Thank you so much. How about you, Miracle?
About being the best.
Or in the best position to do it.
Okay, I wouldn't really say I was in the best position to do
I
it.
beg to differ.
Okay. This famous quote that Toni Morrison is known for: if there's a book you want to read and you haven't seen it, you should write it. Paraphrased, actually. So this was a book. I mean, I read a lot of Western novels, serial killers, and the whole suspense. And I was always seeing people, Dylan, Kevin, I wanted to see someone called Ikechukwu being murdered. I wanted to have a situation in Nigeria where, even though we know how the police force and everything is, I wanted detectives. I wanted to bring that world home. So, because I know as a child, if I had seen any murder mystery or whodunit set in Nigeria, set in Africa, I would have been really excited. But none of that existed. To me, I mean, I later found out there were some, but I didn't see any, and I wanted to create one. And then when I got the chance, I did that, and everyone has access to it.
And everybody is happy.
Yes, everybody is happy.
Thank you so much for writing that story.
Thank
I was
you.
very excited to read it because, I'm a Port Harcourt girl too.
Yeah.
So it was set like my city.
Yes, that was something else. Most books were always set in Lagos. And if they want to be kind enough, you see Enugu, and sometimes Abuja. But it was that. And at the point, I wondered, where am I living? Like, is Port Harcourt not on the map? Why? I mean, it's fiction. You could just pretend and put Port Harcourt, but none of them. And so I was like, no, I'm putting Port Harcourt on that map. And yeah. So a lot of people were really excited. For the first time, a book is not in Lagos. I really need to read it. So yes, that was something else.
See, that worked out.
Yes, it did.
So now I want to take readings, just short readings. Do you have a place you're particular about, like in your book? I have a copy here.
To read.
I'd like you to choose, but for the others, I already chose. You're reading up to 77, so that's the end of the chapter.
Wow, really?
It's not that long, I practiced it.
Up to 70, up to the end of the chapter. Okay. When Baba was brought to Harare for school by the Good Samaritan organization who liked how smart he was, he met and fell in love with Mama. And even though they are always telling us that love and school don't mix, it's obvious that no one told them the same thing or didn't tell it to them every chance they got. Mama finished her A-levels after she had Chichi and then went to England to be with Baba. He was 20 by then, and his scholarship allowed him to have his family. Even though Mama's family were not happy, there was nothing they could do. They didn't like Baba because they thought he spoiled their daughter's chances of a good future, and especially because his family was poor and a bit scattered all over the place. Some of Baba's family live in Zambia and some in South Africa, and they're not so close. Mama's family were comfortable, and as their oldest child, they had wanted to shine with her. They said she didn't set a good example for his sisters. Anyway, it's not a very dramatic story, and they didn't like to talk about it much. I think that they gave us the diet version. One day I overheard Mama telling her friend that when she first found out she was pregnant with Chichi, she thought about not having her because she wasn't so much into kids and she knew her parents would be disappointed. She said she even got a pill to take to close the chapter before it had begun, but then she fell asleep while she was still thinking about it, and in the morning her mother was so all in her business that she didn't have time, and by the time evening came, things had changed. You overhear a lot of things, don't you? Mitikaish murmurs. Otherwise, how will I know anything? They laugh dryly, little pitchers with big ears. All the better to hear with, Grandma, I laugh. Was all the response I got. I had thought I might get a good rise out of that one, but Metikash knows what I'm about. Even if you knew, they say, what would it change? I am who I am, and it's more than good enough. It's amazing, I say. Now you're just flattering me. They sit up. Their outfit is in full ombre mode now, no longer white, but fully stained with sun colors becoming night and flowers all around their head as if they have been arranged by some high-end florist. Their dreads are black again. You're tricky, I say. I am what you make me, they smile. What changed in the evening for your mother? I don't know. The trouble with eavesdropping is that you don't always get to hear everything. I had to gap it when I heard Baba coming up the stairs and act like I was minding my own business. I never told Chichi. Mama was her favorite, and you could never tell that Mama was not so into kids except for that time with Tana. It wasn't really about him. It was more that she wasn't that much into herself during that time. I started to know Mama when I was about 6. Before that, all the things I knew about anything got left in the place behind things. That's where once in a while you find yourself there and you think, wow, how did I ever think this building was so huge, or that person was so scary, and where the monsters in the cupboard were really noises the pipes made at night, except that at that time, they really were monsters, and the buildings were really that huge, and the person really was that scary. But you leave it all behind and build new, more solid stories about things, stories you can all believe. Next to me, Metikaish sighs deeply. Okay, it's going to be a while until we get to the heart of the matter, isn't it? I'd thought to lull you into a more excitable pace, but I see it's not to be. Where have you got to be anyway? What's the rush? You tell me, they say, and with no sound at all, gone. Sighing myself, I turn over, and that was the end of that.
That was so beautiful. I chose well. Okay, for Ruby, you have page 33, second paragraph, to page 37.
Okay, so to give a little backstory, Amele, whom we've discussed, she ends up being a maid to a relative of her family. And this is the first time she meets the lady who she eventually stays with. I blew on the logs again. Nothing happened. Sister Mele, a car has stopped in front of our house. It's posh. When the door opened, cold air like the Hamatan wind came out, and the woman inside must be Miss Ghana or something. Chuchu said all this without pausing for breath. One hand covered her mouth. I turned and looked around the cooking area. Where's the lizard? She pointed to the rafters. I looked up and saw an extra large gray, black, and blue lizard with a red and orange crest standing itself on one of the planks. I picked up a stone, aimed, and threw it. The lizard ran a few steps and then stopped to bob its head up and down. I shook my head. Nothing I could say would make Chocho remove her hand from her mouth. Her 2 upper front teeth had fallen out, one after the other, 2 weeks ago. Her playmates had told her that if a lizard saw the space where the teeth had been while she was talking, the new teeth would never erupt. Since lizards were common sights on the walls and roofs of our house, Chocho's hands were now permanently glued to her mouth. Sister Mele, come and see, Chocho insisted, pulling me to my feet with her free hand. Amaka hurried into the cooking area. The woman wants to see Amele, Mommy. Sister Mele, won't you go and greet the woman in the car? Chocho asked with her hand still over her mouth. Vashti's cat came into the cooking area and rubbed its body around Amaka's legs. Sister Mele, if you don't go, she'll think we are disrespectful, Amaka said. I looked from one sister to another. I wasn't going to fall for their prank. They had been trying to trick me into going to see Amele Mami the entire morning. Oh, really? I said, pouring some kerosene from a green beer bottle onto the damp wood. Tell her Amele Mami is asleep. We already did. She said we should wake her up. Amaka said, and from the look on her face, I could tell she was serious. I struck a match against the box and held it to the damp wood, knowing even as I did so that I was wasting both my time and the wood's. If this is a prank, we all eat kinky this evening. I won't even try lighting this wood anymore, and I'll send both of you to get the kinky from Ofoi Mami. Sister Amelie, we are not lying to you. Just come and see her, Chocho said, dragging me out with one hand. I followed Amaka and Chocho, though I expected them to start laughing about how I had fallen for their prank when we got to the main compound. To my surprise, there was indeed a black jeep parked under the cashew tree. I could see movement behind our neighbors' curtains as people spied on us. I didn't blame them. I would have done the same if the situation had been reversed. This being a Sunday, almost everyone was home, but there would be no gossip tonight because there was no way the occupants of that car knew any members of my family. The car looked like it had just been oiled with shea butter. It gleamed and sparkled in the sunlight. A woman dressed in a rich gold lace cap and slits stood by the back door. I could see why Chocho thought she was Miss Ghana. She was beautiful. She was even more beautiful than the current Miss Ghana. And she was here to see Amelie Mami. Surely there must have been a mistake. This woman must have gotten our Amelie Mami mixed up with some other Amelie Mami. There was no way my mother knew someone this posh. The woman had fancy written all over her. She had gold jewelry on her neck, ears, wrists, and fingers. Huge sunglasses hid her eyes and almost half of her face. When she used her hand to position her sunglasses properly, the gold bracelets on her wrist sparkled. I could see she felt uncomfortable as our neighbors came out of their rooms to stare at her. No longer satisfied with spying from behind their windows, all of the adults suddenly found reasons to be outdoors. The children openly gawked. Most of the older kids carried their younger brothers and sisters on their backs. I could count 4 children with runny noses, including Chocho. 2 others had conjunctivitis. They had been rubbing their red eyes the entire day. I walked quickly to where she stood. Amaka and Chocho were close on my heels, their eyes fixed on the woman. "Good afternoon, madam," I said. "Oh, hello. You must be Naamele." I gasped. How did she know that? A part of me was thinking, if she knew my name, that meant I also knew someone posh. I couldn't quite process that at the moment. "Yes, madam," I stammered. She really did know my mother. How? Were they classmates? I very much doubted that, since Amelie Mami had dropped out of school when she was 10. How did they know each other? A ripple of excitement went through me as I noted everything about her. I'd have a lot to tell Sheba when I saw her next. "My, look how you've grown," the woman said, taking a step toward me and reaching out as if she wanted to hug me. At the last minute, she withdrew her hands and looked at me from head to toe, but not before I had caught a whiff of her perfume. She smelled like jasmine and orange blossoms. As she put her arms back by her side, I realized how dirty my sisters and I looked. We had not had a bath in 4 days. The taps had gone off a week ago, even at the church down the street. Though we had a drum full of water, we had begun rationing our supply, and bathing daily didn't feature high on our list of priorities. "I'm Rosina, your mother's friend. Tell her I'm here." Your mother's friend kept playing through my mind as I hurried to do as I was told. So Amelie Mami did know posh people. If Amelie Mami knew this woman, were there others we didn't know about? It's quite lengthy. Should I go on?
I want you to stop at, "There's a woman here to see you." So, yeah.
Okay. Amelie Mami had never mentioned a friend called Rosina. I hadn't even known Amelie Mami knew anyone who owned a private car. I didn't remember ever meeting this Rosina woman. There was no way I'd have forgotten her face, her clothes, or her smell. It was a bad time to notice that Markai hadn't swept in front of our room. Goat droppings lay scattered everywhere. I wiped my feet on the shabby welcome mat. Out of the 7 letters, only 3 remained, E, L, and M. Various mismatched chaliwotes lay scattered on and around the mat. I kicked them to the corner of the veranda and opened the screen door with the torn mosquito netting. I quickly rolled up our mattresses. I swept aside the faded curtains to Amelie Mami's sleeping area, where she lay on the bed. I nudged her. She groaned and asked me to go away, but I persisted. "There's a woman here to see you, a posh woman. She's called Auntie Rosina." Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll know what happened to Janet Uzo.
Okay, I'm going to read a portion that would probably explain the whole context of the book. They were once a trio: Pamela, Ebere, and Janet. She had been the vivacious one, Janet, the queen bee, the one who could get whatever she wanted, the definition of beauty and brains. Pamela still couldn't bring herself to think about the incident. All she knew was that 1 minute, Janet was alive, and the next, she was dead. Ebere, on the other hand, liked to remember things, every little detail. And like a buzzing fly, she never let up. She hadn't been the same since Janet died. Ebere had been annoying before, but now she was often unbearable. When Janet's body arrived at the mortuary, a 23-year-old resident doctor, who happened to be Ebere's aunt, received it. Ebere had been so adamant that Janet wasn't dead, that it was all a huge mistake. She had camped outside the hospital for hours waiting for confirmation. Her aunt had to deliver the truth to her personally. But she told Ebere something else too, and had unknowingly planted a seed in her mind that managed to grow into a mighty oak. During the autopsy, her aunt had noticed something strange. Janet's lungs didn't have the amount of water one would expect for a drowning victim. If I didn't know any better, I would say she was already dead before she got into that river. Ebere became an investigator. In the months afterwards, she started to research and piece together deaths of other kids in their town. And she narrowed them down to 4 suspicious cases, all the victims from Afobiri Secondary School. There was James Iyaye, the senior prefect, whose spleen had been ruptured by a car as he crossed the street. A year later, Paul Tamnowari was found dead in a well. And the next year, Martha Arthur had been discovered by her mother, lying twisted at the bottom of the stairs with a broken neck. Then exactly a year ago today, Janet Uzor was found responsive on the shallow banks of Ibeto River. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our 3 authors. You have done so well. I'm going to read the books again because that's how I do things. So now we're going to move to Q&A. If you have any questions, please indicate. We have somebody. And another person. Are you stretching? Okay.
Good day, everyone. My name is Lara, and I have a question just thrown to the panel. Anyone can answer it. My question is, writing YA has to, you have to balance out the conflict and make it easier for young adults to read it. So how do you try and make it not a lot of conflict, so it's not like too much for their like sensibility? Like, how do you make it easy for young people to read about conflict and understand it without feeling, getting depressed or feeling like getting scared about like what actually goes on in the world?
Well, in my case, I feel like young adults, especially young adult readers, they are aware of a lot more than we think. They know what's going on. And my approach when I'm writing for a young audience is I write as honestly as I can, and usually it somehow kind of balances itself out, because I don't think so much of who I'm writing for. I focus more on how authentic my story is being and whether the voice is being honest and being real. And I think that with young people, the best thing we can do when we are sharing with them is just to be honest.
Yeah, let me just add something to what Blessing said. So alongside being honest, how I handle YA is I tried my best to be very empathetic, to put myself in the shoes of these young adults. I try to imagine myself as them, imagine their struggles, imagine how life is for them. And I think it's easier because when I was writing What Happened to Janet Uzo, I was actually a young adult myself. So I was actually feeling the feelings, I was going through everything, I was having all the whole conflicts with my parents, and it was so easy to pen that down. And so growing with the book and continuously writing, it soon became a go-to for me. So I could easily just put myself in their shoes, and I know how to put things to them. I know how I wanted to hear things when I was a child, so I would actually do that to them so it would make more impact. Thank you.
Thank you. You're next. You in front.
Okay. Hi, my question is for Ruby. So I read a lot of children's books. I actually first discovered you from Mama's Amazing Cover Cloth. So I'm wondering how easy is it to transition from picture books to, because Mama's Amazing Cover Cloth is a picture book, so from picture books to YA, and I'm just finding out that you have books for adults as well.
Well, so I read everything. I have picture books, I have YA books, I have adult books. So when I get a story idea, it depends on where it fits. And personally, for me, writing picture books is like the hardest thing ever, because these are like sometimes as young as 2, 3, and you have to get their imagination and keep it, you know. So I read a lot to know what they like and what the trends are and what keeps them. It's easier if you're writing for young adults or for adults because you can describe as much as you want, you do all those things. But with picture books, you have just maybe maximum 800 words or something, and then most of everything else is in the pictures themselves. So I read a lot, and I test it out. I have a large family, so I test it out on my nephews and nieces, and they are my first beta readers. It's not, writing young adults and adults is not too difficult for me. I find it more difficult to write picture books. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's someone in front. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so this question is for Miracle, sorry. So you said you wrote the story you wanted to see written, and that means if you wrote it when you were young and it's published now, what was your journey to seeing your book in print like? Did you ever think that was going to happen?
No. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, so did I see myself being an author? Yes, I did. The thing is, I think this whole thing still boils down to this whole YA and this awareness. Now, as a child, I actually had no idea it was possible to be an author. All I knew was I had to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. Those were the only careers, else you were a failure. So these were the only things I knew to be, and writing was a hobby. I could never think of it as a career. And I had no idea there was anybody like Chimamanda then. I mean, I didn't know who these people were, actually. I just felt they were people who wrote. It wasn't a career, per se. They just wrote for writing's sake. And I found myself in that boat, and obviously it was not a career choice for me. So writing was something on the side. And so when I continued to grow, I continued to get into the world of literature. I took it more seriously. And then for the first time, I think it was in my third year in the university, I discovered you could even study it in school. I felt so cheated, and I was studying biochemistry. it was it was so painful. What am I doing here? And my roommate is reading novels as assignments, and I'm here with huge textbooks, getting chemical reactions. So it was really a journey for me. And finally, I considering the fact I was also writing mystery, and most competitions, most workshops, most programs, they were basically seeking, I don't want to say, but it seemed like they were looking for literary fiction, books that could touch your heart, break your heart. And I was writing about solving a crime. I mean, you really didn't do it for them. So submitting my books, that was something I went through. I would always submit, and I would never be chosen. I would never be picked for anything. And if there were free workshops to be hosted, they were always in Lagos. I was in Port Harcourt. I couldn't make it to any of them. So it became a thing of mindset. I had to change my perception. So I was no longer submitting my books for awards or submitting for people to give me a chance. Instead, I started submitting my books and my works because I wanted people to know I existed. I mean, I submit and I'm like, I know you're not going to pick me. I know I won't win, but yeah, at least you will know there is a mystery writer in Nigeria, so have that. And then one day, out of the blues, I saw like a newspaper clipping, and there was a section, and I saw new publishing house calls for submissions. I'm like, what are submissions? I didn't even know how traditional publishing worked, funny enough. So I checked them out, and they said, do you have something new and exciting? I'm like, I think I do. And I submitted my first 3 chapters, and then they said, hi, Miracle, we like your book, we want the full one. And I submitted, and now we all want to know what happened to Janet Uzo. So. Thank you.
But I know what happened to Janet Uzo. Do you? Who's next, please? Okay, so.
Okay, so I have a question for Miracle and another question for the 3 of you. For Miracle, how is your writing process like? Like, how do you come up with your story development? Because you are a mystery writer, and as you said, it's not something very common in Nigeria here. We hardly have some serial killers. I mean, even though there are killings happening, but in the Western... Like in the Western term, a lot of us grew up with American novels. So how do you develop your story? What's your writing process like? And then for all 3 of you, my second question is, where do you get your inspiration from? How do you get your inspiration? Or how do you come up with ideas to write about?
Okay, let me go first and just answer the first question. So my writing process, I'm a plotter. So what I do is first of all, I get the idea, and then I build on it. I build on the story, I build on the characters, and that building phase is actually the bulk. It contains the bulk of the work, especially my character development. I always talk about this a lot. So each of my characters, I do this criminal profiling for each of them. Like each character has like 16 or 11 pages of information, like their backstory, everything. So it helps me. I'm able to create a character I know from the inside. And so once I'm done with the whole characterization of all my main characters and my plot is ready, then the writing is just easy breezy for me because everything has been set out. Then your second question, what was it? Inspiration. Life itself. I mean, okay, it's going to sound crazy. So there was a day I was sitting in a bus, and I was behind the driver, and you know the rearview mirror in the middle. So I just looked at it, and then I saw my neck, and I imagined someone slitting my throat. and then I had tapped my friend. I was like, Anne, if you look at your neck in the mirror, what comes to your mind? And she looked at me. I know what came to your mind, but let me tell you what comes to normal people's minds. You can can imagine, oh my God, my skin, my necklace. Well, Miracle, I'm sure someone was slitting your throat. I said, yes. So I always imagine the weirdest things, and I could imagine walking down this stairs and like, oh, she falls down, and probably there was a trap there and nobody knew. So I imagine the most bizarre things, and it builds a story in my head. So that's it. Everything inspires me. Thank you.
I think when you said 16 pages, I was like, wow. I mean, that's like, no. So my writing process is chaotic. Sometimes I start from the middle of the book. Sometimes I know the ending. But I think also inspiration is just from everywhere. For this actual book, it was from a news article. So later on in the book, not to give spoilers, but something happens to Naamele, and that was actually a news item, and I felt the child in question hadn't received the justice they deserved, and that story stayed with me for a very long time. So my way of getting justice for the child was in correcting it and writing this book, but inspiration for me comes from everywhere.
For me, in terms of inspiration, yeah, I would say what tends to happen with the way that I write is, I talk to people, I hear a lot of stories. I like the really weird and out there stories, and something about a story that somebody tells me will stick in my head. And what happens is, over time, it's like I have a little map, or like I call it my little suburb. I have a suburb in my head where all ideas have their own address, and once in a while they all come out and have like a neighborhood meet and greet, and then they somehow, the ones that go together will end up in an idea for a story, and it kind of all links up, and that's usually what happens. And then something will spark it off to tie them all together. And then a story starts. And I don't plot. I will plot like the bigger picture. But when I start writing, I tend to change, things as they develop, because characters can have a mind of their own. So, so that's, what I do for inspiration. I think a lot. I spend a lot of time thinking. And if you ask anybody in my house, they will wonder how I ever write anything, because anytime they see me, I'm lying on my bed. But I'm actually working in my head. So I tell people I never leave my office. My office is never closed. So please just leave me alone. Don't ask me what I'm doing. Don't ask me when I'm writing. I'm working. So, yeah.
We are out of time. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But if you want to see the authors, they're going to be at the bookstore to sign books after now. Yes, so don't forget to catch up with them there. Okay, Mercy, last person. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. My question is for Miracle, and then it can go to the other authors. So, I know Nduzo. Did I get it right? Yes. So my question is, Nduzo is her fans, right? Her fans, and they have a community, like how Rihanna has the Navy. So my question is, how do you sustain your fan base?
Yeah. Nduzo.
And for the other writers, do you have those sort of spaces where, okay, a certain demography of readers, like, are your fans, and then they have a name or a tag or something like that? How do you sustain and like give them, and also what's coming next for them? So that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. For the record, one of the Nduzo is right here, Ebose. So sustaining, first of all, building Nduzo, it was a wild thought. It was a wild thought. My book is going to be out soon. I don't know so many people, but I have friends. I know people who know how my journey started. And so I reached out to all of them. And I was like, I have something coming out. I don't know if you'd be interested in helping me out. I would like this book to get to more people. I would like people to know about the book. And so they're like, of course, of course. And then we formed this community, and we didn't have a name. And then I said, okay, what do you think we should name the group? And they told me, let's be the Uzos, Ndozo, since it's what happened to Janet Uzo. And then I'm like, okay, what about another book? Let's answer this one first. And so we became Ndozo. And so far, every single progress of the book, they really helped. They pushed this book. I mean, a lot of them always receive threats. I will block you. Stop posting this book. I am tired. and then when the book came out, whenever someone, they're like, no, this book where they post every time. It's not this book I was always seeing on your status. And people just knew my book, even without knowing the book. They knew they had seen it on someone's status. They had seen the trailer. They had seen this. So they helped me. I gained a wider reach because of them. And so every success of this book, I always, always take it back to them. I always tell them how they are like the foundation. And I always make them know how valuable they are to me, to my writing journey, my careers, and also like they are pivotal. So I don't make them feel this was a one-time thing. I mean, that was where the name, there's another name we have. It's called Mendas. My name is Miracle Emeka Nkwor. So it's an acronym for men. So they just call themselves Mendas, so like people who love the works of men. And I think that's more sustainable for us and any other book I write.
I like Nduzo. Yes, for blessing.
What was the question?
I have a name in mind just in case.
For a fan base?
For your fans.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know who they are yet, so I'm waiting to discover that. But my fan base in past years has been grade 9 readers in South Africa who come to my inbox because they want me to help them do their assignment after they've been given my story to read for school. So that's what I have encountered so far.
I don't have an organized fan base like that. I have people I meet at conferences like this who say, oh, I love your book, or when we go for school readings and stuff like that. So peace to the Nduzos.
Don't worry, fan base coming up soon. We're going to be called the Metichiasis for you.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm still coming up with a name for you. Yeah. Anyway, this has been fun. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to the authors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come for book signing, okay?
and Blessing Musariri, who's a WIDA author. We're very proud. And Ruby Goka. Over to you, Elohor. Check your mics, please.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So nice to finally meet you.